In the small, bustling city of Egan, nestled in Lagos State, Nigeria, Paul and Anna's home radiated warmth and happiness. Their story was one of love, resilience, and dreams. Paul, a devoted husband and father, had always been the anchor of their family, even after a tragic car accident confined him to a wheelchair. Though life had handed him a difficult challenge, Paul embraced it with an unyielding spirit. Anna, with her bright eyes and infectious laughter, had once been Paul's biggest supporter. Together they built a modest but happy life in their little home. Their 5-year-old son Toby was the glue that bound them. Toby was a curious, energetic boy with a heart so big it felt like he could brighten even the darkest days. Every morning began with the same joyful routine. Anna would hum as she prepared breakfast, while Toby darted around the house, chattering about everything he'd dreamed the night before. Paul, seated at the table, would listen intently, his eyes lighting up as Toby recounted his wild adventures about superheroes, talking animals, and flying cars. One morning, the family sat together as Toby animatedly described his dream of a magical forest. "Daddy, in my dream you had superpowers," he said, his small hands waving in excitement. "You could fly and your wheelchair turned into a robot." Paul laughed, his deep voice filling the room. "Well, Toby, maybe one day I'll have powers, but for now I'm just your dad, and that's the best thing I could ever be." Anna watched them with a soft smile. For all her restlessness, moments like these reminded her of the love they had shared when they first met. But deep down, a seed of discontent had begun to grow in her heart. Egan was a small city with modest opportunities. Paul's work as a bookkeeper, done from home, provided enough to get by, but Anna longed for more. She often daydreamed about life in Lagos' glitzy neighborhoods, with their tall buildings, luxury cars, and elegant parties. Paul noticed the faraway look in her eyes but dismissed it, thinking it was just a fleeting thought. He had more pressing concerns. He wanted to make sure Toby never felt the limitations of his father's disability. Paul worked tirelessly, sometimes staying up late into the night to take on extra tasks to provide for his family. One sunny Saturday, Paul decided to take Anna and Toby to a small park near their home. It wasn't much, just a patch of grass with a few benches and a rickety swing set, but it was one of Toby's favorite places. "Push me higher, Daddy," Toby called from the swing, his laughter echoing across the park. Paul maneuvered his wheelchair closer and gave the swing a gentle push, laughing as Toby's curls flew in the wind. Anna sat on a nearby bench, her phone in hand, scrolling through pictures of glamorous women in expensive dresses. "Paul," she said suddenly, "do you ever think about what life could be like somewhere else? Somewhere bigger?" Paul turned to her, his expression calm but serious. "Anna, I've thought about it, of course. But for me, life isn't about where we live. It's about who we live it with. You and Toby are my world. As long as I have you two, I'm happy anywhere." Anna smiled, but it was faint and didn't quite reach her eyes. She nodded, tucking her phone back into her bag. "You're right," she said softly, though her thoughts lingered on the shimmering world she saw on her screen. That evening back home, the family sat together for dinner. Paul had cooked. He loved surprising Anna with meals when she seemed tired or distracted. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple pot of jollof rice and grilled fish, but the effort made Anna smile. "Toby," Paul said, turning to his son, "when you grow up, what do you want to be?" Toby's face lit up. "A superhero. Like in my dreams." Paul chuckled. "You don't need superpowers to be a hero, my boy. You just need a big heart and the courage to help others." Anna watched the exchange silently, her fork playing with the rice on her plate. She felt a mix of emotions: pride in Paul's wisdom and the undeniable ache of dissatisfaction. Later that night, after Toby had been tucked into bed, Anna sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street. Paul wheeled himself over to her, his presence calm and steady. "Anna," he said gently, "I know something's been on your mind. Talk to me." She hesitated, then sighed. "It's nothing, Paul. Just, sometimes I wonder if this is all there is for us. Don't you ever wish for more?" Paul placed a reassuring hand on hers. "I do wish for more, for Toby to have the best education, for you to have every comfort you deserve. But I believe we can achieve those things together, right here in our own way. It might take time, but I'm not afraid of hard work." Anna nodded, though her heart felt heavy. She wanted to believe him, to hold on to the love they'd built, but her restless spirit kept whispering that there was a better life waiting elsewhere. The next day, as the sun rose over Egan, Paul was up early, getting ready for work. Though he worked from home, his mornings were busy with paperwork and calls. Toby sat on his lap, scribbling on a piece of paper while Paul typed on his computer. "Daddy, look," Toby said, holding up a drawing of their family. In the picture, Paul stood tall without his wheelchair, with Anna and Toby by his side, all smiling. Paul's chest tightened with emotion. "That's beautiful, Toby. One day maybe I'll stand just like that." "You will, Daddy," Toby said confidently. "You're the strongest person I know." Paul smiled, feeling a renewed sense of determination. For Toby's sake, he would keep pushing forward no matter what. In those days, their little family still held on to the simple joys of life. Evening walks with Toby skipping ahead, bedtime stories that sparked endless giggles, and shared meals filled with laughter. But as the days passed, Anna's longing for more grew stronger. One afternoon, while Paul was engrossed in his work and Toby played with his toys, Anna received a message from an old friend who had moved to Lagos. "You should visit," the friend wrote. "The city is everything you've ever dreamed of: beautiful houses, exciting opportunities, and freedom to live the life you deserve." Anna stared at the message, her heart racing. Could she really leave behind the life she'd built in Egan? Could she walk away from Paul and Toby? That night, as Paul read Toby his favorite bedtime story, Anna stood in the doorway watching them. Toby's laughter filled the room and Paul's voice was steady and warm. It was a scene of pure love, yet Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing for her. She turned away, tears stinging her eyes. The happiness in their home was real, but her dreams of a different life were too powerful to ignore. For now she stayed. But the first seeds of change had been planted, and the love and laughter that defined their home would soon be tested in ways they could never imagine. The days in Egan grew heavier with an unspoken tension. Paul, ever the optimist, continued to pour his energy into his work and family, unaware of the storm brewing in Anna's heart. Toby remained the bright spark in their lives, filling their small home with laughter and chatter, but Anna's mind was elsewhere. One evening, while Paul was preparing Toby's dinner, Anna sat by the window staring at her phone. The messages from her friend in Lagos had become more frequent, each one painting an irresistible picture of a glamorous life. "You deserve better," her friend had written. "Town. Imagine wearing designer clothes, living in a mansion and driving a car that turns heads. You could have it all here." Anna's chest tightened as she read the words. She glanced at Paul, who was carefully scooping rice onto Toby's plate. His movements were slow, deliberate, a reminder of the wheelchair that anchored him. "Anna." Paul's voice broke into her thoughts. "Dinner's ready." She forced a smile and joined them at the table, but her mind was miles away. The tipping point came one afternoon when Paul was out at a local community meeting. A sleek car pulled up outside their home and a well-dressed man stepped out. He was tall, confident, and exuded wealth. Anna recognized him instantly. It was Femi, an acquaintance from years ago who now lived in Lagos. "Anna." Femi greeted her with a broad smile. "I was passing through Egan and thought I'd stop by. How have you been?" Anna invited him in, her heart racing. Femi's presence was magnetic, his stories of life in Lagos captivating. He spoke of high-end restaurants, luxury parties, and endless opportunities. "You could thrive in Lagos," he said, leaning forward. "You're too vibrant for this place. Don't you ever feel like you're wasting your potential here?" Anna hesitated, glancing at Toby, who was playing with his toys in the corner. "It's not that simple, Femi. I have a family." Femi smiled, his voice smooth. "A family doesn't mean you stop living your own life. Think about it. You deserve to shine." That night, as Paul sat in his wheelchair reading over some documents, Anna stood behind him, her hands trembling. She had made up her mind. "Paul," she said, her voice shaky. He turned to look at her, his face open and kind. "What's wrong, Anna?" I need to go," she blurted out. Paul's brows furrowed. "Go? Where?" "To Lagos," she said quickly. "I can't stay here anymore, Paul. This life, it's not enough for me." Paul stared at her, his heart sinking. "Anna, what are you saying? We have a family. Toby needs you. I need you." Tears filled Anna's eyes, but she steeled herself. "You'll manage. You're strong, Paul. And Toby loves you. But I can't keep living like this, feeling trapped." Paul's voice broke. "Is it because of me? Because I'm in this wheelchair?" "No," Anna said, but her hesitation betrayed her. "It's not just that. It's everything. I need more than what Egan can give me. I'm sorry. Paul's world shattered in that moment. He wanted to beg her to stay, but the look in her eyes told him it was futile. She had already made up her mind. The next morning, Anna packed her bags. Toby, too young to understand the gravity of what was happening, clung to her leg. "Mummy, where are you going?" he asked, his big eyes filled with confusion. Anna knelt down, her heart breaking. "Mummy has to go away for a little while, Toby. But Daddy will take care of you, okay?" Toby began to cry and Paul wheeled himself into the room, his face pale but composed. "Anna, please don't do this," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. But Anna didn't look back. She kissed Toby on the forehead, grabbed her bags and walked out the door. As the car drove away, Toby stood at the window sobbing. Paul wheeled over to him and pulled him into his arms. "It's okay, my boy," Paul whispered, though his own tears streamed down his face. "We'll be okay. I promise." In Lagos, Anna quickly embraced her new life with Femi. The city dazzled her with its lights, luxury and endless possibilities. Femi showered her with gifts, taking her to the finest restaurants and introducing her to influential people. But back in Egan, Paul's life became a daily struggle. With Anna gone, he had to balance work, house chores and raising Toby alone. Nights were the hardest as he often found Toby crying for his mother. "Why did Mummy leave us?" Toby asked one night, his voice small and broken. Paul hugged him tightly, fighting back his own tears. "Sometimes people make choices that hurt, Toby. But it doesn't mean they don't love us. We're going to be strong, okay? For each other." Despite his pain, Paul refused to give up. He worked tirelessly, determined to provide a good life for Toby. But the void Anna left behind was undeniable, and the road ahead seemed impossibly long. The days after Anna left were the hardest Paul had ever known. The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by Toby's occasional sobs as he cried himself to sleep. Paul stayed strong for his son, bottling his own pain and focusing on what he could do to rebuild their lives. He couldn't let Toby see him break. Every morning, Paul woke early, determined to make the best of what they had. He juggled his bookkeeping job with household responsibilities, often pushing himself to exhaustion. Yet amidst the struggle, his love for Toby kept him going. "Daddy," Toby said one evening, holding out a drawing he had made. It was a picture of Paul standing tall, holding Toby's hand. "When will you stand like this?" Paul's heart clenched. He looked at Toby's innocent face and knew he had to fight harder, not just for Toby's future, but for his own. "Soon, Toby," Paul said with a small smile. One day soon. Paul began researching medical treatments for his paralysis. Though his accident had been severe, there were whispers of hope in the form of innovative therapies and surgeries. He reached out to specialists, made appointments and began saving every penny he could spare. His determination was unshakable. When he wasn't working, he exercised relentlessly, building his upper body strength and pushing his physical limits. His neighbors in Egan, inspired by his resilience, began to rally around him. "You're an inspiration, Paul," said Mrs. Ade, an elderly woman who lived next door. "If anyone can do this, it's you." Months turned into years and Paul's progress was steady. After undergoing a series of grueling surgeries and rehabilitation sessions, he took his first tentative steps with the help of crutches. It was a moment of triumph that brought tears to his eyes. "Look, Toby," he called out, standing shakily but proudly in their small living room. Toby's face lit up with joy. "Daddy, you're like a superhero now." Paul laughed, pulling Toby into a hug. "No superpowers, just hard work. But we're not stopping here, Toby. We're going to make our lives better step by step." Paul's newfound mobility brought new opportunities. He expanded his bookkeeping services into a thriving business, offering financial consultations to small businesses across Lagos. His reputation grew as a man of integrity and resilience, and soon he began earning enough to move Toby into a better school and provide a more comfortable life. Through it all, Toby remained Paul's greatest motivation. The boy grew into a bright and cheerful child, excelling in school and making his father proud. "Daddy," Toby said one day as they sat together after dinner, "do you think Mummy will ever come back?" Paul paused, his gaze softening. "I don't know, Toby. But even if she doesn't, we have each other. And that's enough." As Paul's life flourished, Anna's dream life in Lagos began to unravel. Femi, the man who had promised her the world, revealed himself to be untrustworthy. He squandered his money on reckless pursuits and often left Anna alone for days on end. Anna found herself sinking deeper into despair. The glamorous life she had chased was nothing more than a mirage. Femi's wealth disappeared as quickly as it had come, and soon she was left penniless and alone in a city that no longer sparkled. Meanwhile, Paul's transformation was complete. He no longer needed crutches to walk, and his business had grown into one of the most respected firms in Lagos. His success story was shared in local papers, and people often sought his advice not just on finances but on life itself. One evening, as Paul tucked Toby into bed, the boy looked up at him with a curious expression. "Daddy, do you ever get tired?" Paul smiled, brushing Toby's curls out of his face. "Sometimes, my boy. But then I remember why I keep going. It's for you. Always for you." Toby hugged his father tightly, whispering, "I love you, Daddy." Paul held him close, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. They had weathered the storm, and though the journey had been painful, they were stronger for it. But as Paul and Toby thrived, a shadow from their past was about to reappear, bringing with it old wounds and difficult choices. The once bright lights of Lagos no longer dazzled Anna. The city, which had seemed like a gateway to a glamorous life, now felt cold and unforgiving. After Femi's wealth evaporated, Anna was left to fend for herself. She moved from one menial job to another, barely able to afford rent in a rundown apartment. Her once pristine clothes grew tattered, and the sparkle in her eyes faded. She thought often of Toby, his laughter echoing in her memory. Guilt gnawed at her, but pride kept her from reaching out. One rainy evening, Anna sat alone in her tiny room, staring at the worn photograph she had kept of her family. It was taken on Toby's 3rd birthday, Paul smiling brightly despite being in his wheelchair, Toby sitting on his lap, and Anna beside them, her arms wrapped around Paul's shoulders. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered to herself, "What have I done?" Anna's breaking point came when she was evicted from her apartment. With nowhere else to turn, she boarded a bus back to Egan, carrying nothing but a small bag of belongings and a heart full of regret. The journey was long, and each mile brought her closer to the reality she had abandoned. As the bus pulled into the familiar streets of Egan, Anna's heart raced. The small city looked unchanged, but she knew her return would stir old emotions and unanswered questions. She hesitated before walking to Paul's house, unsure of what she would find. Would he even let her in? Meanwhile, Paul was in the middle of preparing dinner when there was a knock at the door. Toby, now 8 years old, rushed to answer it. "Daddy, there's someone at the door," Toby called. Paul wiped his hands and wheeled himself toward the door, even though he no longer needed to rely on the wheelchair for mobility. But before he reached it, Toby swung the door open and there stood Anna. "Mummy?" Toby's voice was small, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and confusion. Paul froze, his gaze locking onto Anna. She looked nothing like the woman who had left 3 years ago. Her once glamorous appearance was replaced with a worn and weary look. "Paul," Anna said, her voice trembling. I've come back." Paul stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You left us, Anna," he said, his voice steady but laced with pain. "What do you want now?" Anna's knees buckled as she dropped her bag and fell to the floor, sobbing. "I made a mistake, Paul. I thought I was chasing a better life, but all I found was misery. I lost everything, Femi, the money, my dignity. And I lost you and Toby. Please forgive me." Toby stood frozen, clutching Paul's hand tightly. "Daddy, is Mummy staying?" he asked, his voice tinged with both hope and fear. Paul knelt beside his son, his eyes never leaving Anna's. "Toby, your mother made choices that hurt us. But forgiveness isn't something we give lightly. It's something she'll have to earn." Paul allowed Anna to stay in the guest room that night, but he made it clear that trust would take time to rebuild. Toby, despite his initial excitement, struggled to understand why his mother had left and why she was now back. "Daddy, do you still love Mummy?" Toby asked as Paul tucked him into bed. Paul hesitated before answering. "Toby, love doesn't disappear overnight. But love isn't always enough. Trust, respect, and actions, they matter just as much." Over the next few weeks, Anna worked hard to regain Paul and Toby's trust. She helped around the house, cooked meals, and spent as much time with Toby as he allowed. Yet Paul remained guarded. One evening, Anna approached Paul as he worked in his study. "Paul, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm here to make things right, whatever it takes. Paul looked at her, his expression softening for the first time. Anna, the man you left behind no longer exists. I've rebuilt myself for Toby and for me. If you're truly here to stay, you'll need to show me that you've changed. Words won't be enough. Anna began volunteering at the local community center, hoping to show Paul and Toby her sincerity. Slowly, Toby warmed up to her, though the wounds of her absence were still fresh. One afternoon, as they played together in the park, Toby looked up at Anna and said, "Mummy, will you stay this time?" Anna's heart broke. "Yes, Toby. Stay. I promise." Paul watched from a distance, his emotions a whirlwind of hope and doubt. Could he truly forgive Anna? Could they rebuild their family after all the pain? As Anna continued to prove herself, Paul began to see glimpses of the woman he had fallen in love with. But the journey of reconciliation was far from over, and the final test of their love and resilience lay just ahead. The weeks that followed Anna's return were filled with a mixture of emotions: hope, hesitation, and cautious optimism. Paul and Toby were trying in their own ways to heal from the wounds of the past. While Anna worked hard to prove herself, Paul continued to be wary, unable to forget the pain she had caused. Toby, on the other hand, had already begun to open his heart again to the mother he had once lost. Anna spent her days helping out at the community center and getting to know the people in Egan. She was determined to build a new life, not just for herself but for her family. Every evening she sat with Toby, reading stories and helping him with his schoolwork. It was a simple yet deeply meaningful routine. One afternoon, Paul came home from a business meeting to find Anna in the kitchen, preparing their dinner. She turned to him with a nervous smile. "I know things aren't the same, Paul, but I want you to know I'm trying. I'm here for both of you now." Paul paused for a moment, looking at her carefully. His mind was filled with thoughts of the past, the hurt and the betrayal. But as he watched Anna, he saw something different in her now, a woman who was genuinely trying to make amends, not with words but with actions. "I can see that, Anna," Paul said softly. "It's not easy for me, but I can see you're changing." That evening, as they sat together for dinner, Toby spoke up. "Daddy, I'm glad Mummy's here. It feels like our family is whole again." Paul's heart tugged at his son's words. He had never realized just how much Toby longed for the family they had once been. Slowly his guard began to lower. One afternoon, as Paul was working in his office, Anna came to him with a small envelope in her hands. "Paul, there's something I want to say to you." She handed him the envelope, which contained a letter. Paul opened it, and as he read, his eyes softened. The letter was from Anna, written from her heart. It was filled with apologies, regrets, and a deep desire to make things right. She expressed how much she had learned about herself and the mistakes she had made. In the letter, she promised to spend the rest of her life trying to earn back his trust and the love of their son. As Paul finished reading, Anna's eyes were filled with anticipation. "Paul, I know I don't deserve this, but I hope you can forgive me." Paul set the letter down and looked at her for a long time. "Anna, forgiveness isn't something that happens overnight. It's a choice, and I have to make it every day." He paused, his heart heavy with the weight of their past. "But seeing you here, seeing how much you've changed, I think we can start again. I'm willing to try for us, for Toby." Tears filled Anna's eyes. "Thank you, Paul. You don't know how much this means to me." Days turned into weeks, and slowly their family began to find its rhythm again. Anna's presence became a steady comfort in their lives, and Paul, though still cautious, began to believe in the possibility of rebuilding their future. He focused on his work, growing his business even more, while Anna supported him and took care of Toby. Together they started creating new memories, ones that would replace the painful ones of the past. One Saturday afternoon, Paul and Anna took Toby to the park. It was a sunny day, and the air was filled with the sound of children's laughter. Toby ran ahead, his energy boundless as he chased after a ball. Anna and Paul walked behind him, hand in hand. "I never thought we'd be here again," Anna said quietly, looking at Paul with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "I didn't either," Paul replied, his voice full of emotion. "But sometimes life gives us second chances. And we've earned this one." Anna looked at him, her heart swelling. "I'll never take it for granted again. I'll never leave." As the three of them sat on the grass watching Toby play, a sense of peace settled over them. The past couldn't be undone, but the future was full of new possibilities. They had found their way back to each other, stronger and more united than before. Months later, Paul stood at the head of a small gathering in their home. It was a celebration of their new beginning, a milestone in their journey together. Friends and neighbors from Egan filled the room, and Toby proudly introduced his parents to everyone. "I'm so proud of you, Daddy," Toby said, looking up at Paul. "You're a hero to me." Paul smiled, a sense of fulfillment he had never known before filling him. "And you, Toby, are my hero." Anna stood beside him, her hand in his. The family they had once lost had been found again, stronger, more united, and more filled with love than ever before. As the night drew to a close, Paul turned to Anna. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Anna smiled, her eyes shining with hope and love. "Yes, we have. And I'm never going to let go again." With Toby's laughter echoing through their home, Paul and Anna knew that though life had tested them, they had come out stronger on the other side. The road to forgiveness had been long, but the love they had rediscovered was worth every step. Together they had built a new life, a life filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future.